Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This week's show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Boys, Season 4, Episode 4. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. This might be one of the most, I don't know, man. This episode's it's pretty early in the video, so I can't say what I want to say, but it's like, this is a rough episode all across the board in a lot of ways. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the Homelander side of things. Obviously, he went to go visit the facility. They're on high alert, being like, yo, we can't get a response from anyone. And lo and behold, the most disturbing thing you could see. Hey, here's Homelander with a cake and he's acting all friendly. Like the queasiness, you feel that entire scene because you're like, you know this is going to go. Because there's a scene in the teaser where he's like, the last shot of the episode, I saw that in the teaser. I was like, oh, this is that scene. No one's making it out of here alive. Didn't even need that context. You knew things were going to get bad. You just didn't know how bad things were going to get. It was such a slow process throughout the episode because it's like, oh, him acting all friendly, having questions like, oh, Barbara isn't here. Well, call Barbara in. She's off site. Tell her to come on down. I want to talk to her. Everyone gets a slice of cake. And I was like, okay. And that was like the cold open. And like I said, just one by one, we had the Frank situation at first. Because that's the thing of like, we are 4 seasons deep and they're making us, I mean, to be fair, the show already, it's not even a thing of like, you're like, oh, it sucks what happened to Homelander. But it's that nature versus nurture conversation, and Homelander is the antithesis of that, of like, he is a product of his environment, literally, because he was made, and that can jack you up on your own. But also, like, the experiments they ran on him, the terrible stuff they did to him, made him into the monster that he is. But then the question then becomes like, well, maybe he was screwed from the very beginning. Maybe that becomes a thing of like, depending on how you view things, like, oh, are people naturally good, naturally evil? I like to believe people are a neutral point, and then it is nurture that decides how you play out. But I mean, people can agree. I think that's just a person by person basis on what your belief is on that situation. But it's like, when you hear about how Homelander came into the world, first and foremost, we find out like the woman who gave birth to him was like a runaway they paid to. They injected it. They put the embryo in her, and she gave birth to him. He lasered her open, came flying out, umbilical cord still intact. But it's like, it's kind of sad knowing like, oh, you unintentionally killed your birth mother, but we still also don't know whose embryo it is. I hadn't talked about it up to this point, but some of the big theories was like, my thought was, when we saw like a little glimpse of the flashback, who we now know as Barbara, I was wondering if she was his mom. I didn't know Barbara was like associated with the lab. It would make sense if she was, but I was thinking like maybe she's the embryo. But other people have kind of wondered, is it Stormfront? I mean, we know oh God, I'm going to use the most disgusting term. We know where the baby gravy came from, but we just don't know who the mom was. And, well, we know that Soldier Boy and Stormfront, well, she was Liberty at the time, did have a thing, but who knows? I mean, she was like the first soup too, so putting her together with Soldier Boy, it makes a lot of sense. But I don't know if this season's going to confirm that. I don't know if it's even worth confirming. It feels like they're hiding that for a reason, but we'll see. Like I said, the running theory is his mom's got to be Stormfront, which, once again, makes the whole him hooking up with her that much more effed up. Did she know that? Did she know about the Soldier Boy of it all? We know Noir knew a lot, so he might have known. That was never like anything that... I mean, maybe he was kept in the dark too. Maybe Edgar's like one of the last, maybe him and Barbara are like the last 2 people alive that know the truth. Either way, tangents and all that aside, I mean, it's all pertinent. But either way, it's getting back to that larger conversation about like, yeah, like we see what Homelander went through. It's like, yo, they put him through some very, oh God, who am I thinking of? Doomsday. If you've ever seen Krypton, it showcases, Doomsday's history, and I don't know if this is canonical to him in the comics as well, but at least in the Krypton show, it wasn't even just Krypton. I was like, right, they did it, spoilers, in Superman and Lois as well, when it came to Doomsday. It's like, right, torturing you with everything. I mean, in Doomsday's case, it's like, right, we're trying to kill you with everything possible so that your body adapts, because that's how Doomsday works. He adapts to whatever happens to him so it can't kill him again. That's kind of his whole deal. Homelander just trying to see like the limits of his abilities of what he can stand. And so that whole it's like, oh yeah, let's kind of play some wastebasket. He's like, yeah, oh, you might not remember this. You actually taught me this game. I remember I was in that room and I watched you sink one and you were like, yes, celebrating. But that was behind a whole bunch of scientists who were looking at me, taking notes as the temperature was rising in this room. You know, he's like, right, it didn't actually burn my skin, but it still hurt like hell. I felt everything. But all I remember is you. And then Frank said, probably the worst possible thing you could say. He's like, I was just doing my job. Now, would it have made a difference? No. Homelander, like the moment Homelander came here, he already had in his head he was going to kill everybody. We never saw upstairs, but you can only assume we couldn't contact anyone because he killed everyone. So, I mean, and also I think it speaks volumes that he wasn't covered in blood, so probably lasered everyone. But so there's that element of it. So he already came in here with the intentions of killing everyone because he's trying to burn his past, you know, figuratively and literally. And so Frank was already screwed no matter what. Probably would have been better to start with I'm sorry. And I think Marty's I'm sorry later on doesn't mean as much because I mean, it's that complicated thing of like what we get with Homelander of, oh yeah, I want someone smart telling me what to do, but I also hate people telling me what to do. I don't want yes people around me, but I push back when the smartest person in the world tells me to do something. So, you know, if that's not a personification of the human condition of just being like walking enigmas and contradictions and oxymorons of like, oh, we want this, but we also want this. It's like he's so flippant in what he wants because it's all about his own control. And I guess in a lot of ways, this is Homelander trying to take back control of himself, especially considering literally ended last episode with his psyche being split between the three versions of himself, the three other versions of himself in the mirror. It's like, right, this is his way, like I said, burning his past so he can burn away that last remnants of humanity that's in him. But like I said, we'll get to that. But like I said, my point is, even if they say sorry, it was never going to do anything, which is interesting how that through line is permeated throughout the episode too. That element. It's like this season is a lot about the past and I'm sorry's and making up for the past. And it's like, can you? Is it too late? Then we see that in so like, even though all the plot threads are like on their respective things, like Kimiko's going down her route, Frenchie's going down his route, Huey's going down his route, Butcher. You know, the only one that hasn't really had that arc this season is MM. I mean, I guess he has his own, but I mean, that's not, his arc is just about trying to fill the role of leader, where everyone is so stretched, dealing with their own respective, like, past trauma that they're trying to, just past in general, that they're trying to, like, alleviate, which is like, oh, like, perfect timing, because I've been going through my own existential crisis about mistakes I've made in the past and wanting to rectify them but being unable to. It's just like sometimes you just, you know, sorry isn't good enough, and also sometimes you just can't make things right. And it's like, so just the seasons hit me on a personal level, like it's just like, oh, this came at like the perfect time, or the worst time depending on your perspective on it. But either way, so yeah, you know, once again, my circumstances are obviously nowhere near the level of like what's going on. But it's like, once again, just like the way you handle things in the past, you're like, I wish I'd done things differently. You can't turn back the clock. Like I said, that feeling is something I've been like dealing with like a lot lately. Like that's kind of been ruminating throughout my mind recently. But anyway, but yeah, getting back to Frank. Just telling Frank to go in there and it's just like, I'm sorry. He's like, no, I forgive you, Frank. But he says that after Frank gets boiled, not even boiled, just like fried. And it's just like, that's disturbing. Everyone had to watch that. You're like, oh God, this is fucked. Then he moves over to Marty and Marty called him Squirt. I was like, okay, what's that nickname about? And it turns out it's because Marty, like every once in a while, he knew Marty's pattern, so he knew like, okay, Marty's going to leave for a couple minutes. This gives me time to jerk one out, but he didn't finish in time, and then Marty showed up, laughed at him, and gave him the nickname Squirt. You're like, oh, fuck. I was like, oh, Marty. And then he proceeded to have Marty jack off in front of her. I was like, oh, God. I was like, this is fucked. This is the word I wanted to say at the beginning. Like, we're deep enough in this recording, I could just say, like, this episode was fucked, especially like the John stuff. You're like, oh God, that's so jacked up, that's so disturbing. But yeah, I had him jack off, and it's just like he's there laughing, having everyone gather around, and he's like, yo, like Marty, either you get hot, you either get hard, or I'm gonna laser your dick. And Marty couldn't do it, so he lasered him. And he's like, oh my God, you got your dick blood all over the place. It's like, dude, and he's laughing like, so this is like, I don't like, I don't know, man. Me personally, him laughing the way he did, I was like, this might be the most evil Homelander. Like he's done some horrendous evil shit. He's murdered so many people. I don't know why, but like him laughing the way he did is the most like sinister shit he's ever done. Like just like that maniacal evil villain laugh. It's like, ugh. Makes you sick to your stomach. You're like, poor Marty. But also at the same time, you're like, I mean, these people did torture him. That ends up being the thing of like, no one's a good guy in this situation. Regardless of them doing their job, which it all comes full circle with Barbara being like, they were doing their job because they were scared. They were scared of you. Which is so interesting because Madeline finally admitted the truth at the end that she was so nice to Homelander because she was scared of him. She was trying to do her job, but she didn't really love him. She was scared of him. She was trying to placate him. And then we have all these people doing their jobs because they're scared of him. People not willing to stand up to Homelander because they're scared of him, except for Sage, but she might be in some like, yo, I'm so far ahead. I think I can outmaneuver you. I think I can manipulate this situation to benefit me before you even cross your mind to even really kill me. I could push the limits of what you're comfortable with because I know you enough to know there's probably there's a high enough percentage chance, there's a decent enough chance that's not zero that you will most likely kill me, but you know, she's waging her bet on like, she's, you know, waging a bet on herself versus Homelander. I think it might be her end game. We still don't know what it is in the long run. Had to put Marty out of his misery by stomping on his head. It's because Barbara asked him to do that. Now, some other things I want to focus on from that Homelander situation too is I think it is so interesting. So very few people refer to him as John. Makes sense that they knew him as John. We even saw like the hype thing that says like, oh, John, until he got 16 and John's crossed out in Homelander. So I'm like, I think that was when Homelander was like, I'm putting my past behind me. Because he makes a point to go like, call me Homelander. Only like, aside from the people in that room, like specifically Barbara and Marty, we didn't hear Frank ever address him like that, but I guess like Marty and Barbara and Vogelbaum are the ones he interacted with the most. So they refer to him as John. The only other person that ever called him John is Maeve. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if Maeve knew him that far back. I'd assume he was already established as Homelander by the time him and Maeve met. Because we don't know how long they knew each other, but. Like, I guess that also shows the closeness of the relationship because no one else calls him John. I don't even remember if Madeline ever called him John. I feel like the first time I ever remember hearing someone call him John, I can never remember if it was Vogelbaum first or whether it was Maeve. Because I know Maeve has tried to call him John to calm him down. Which obviously pisses him off, like hearing the name John, because it's like that associates, you know, he does. Once again, he killed John, and that's what he's trying to do here is like kill John permanently, because it's like, I'm not John anymore, I'm Homelander, trying to kill the human that was John, even though he tried to bury that for so long, only being Homelander. I mean, that's why he's in his super get-up all the time. He's not the only one, but for the most part, it's like, yeah, because slowly but surely, like, we hear other people get called by their name, like, you know, the only person that calls A-Train by his real name Reggie is his brother. So that kind of supposed to show that relationship and that dynamic of like, I see you for who you are, not the superstar you try to pretend to be. And then like, you know, people call Deep Kevin, you know, on an intimacy level like Ambrosius. But it's also, but that doesn't come up that. So it's like that delineation trying to separate the two. It's just always an interesting dichotomy with the different characters by like what name they decide to go by and which one they don't, and how often you hear them being called by their real names versus how often they get called by their superhero names. It's just kind of interesting, and who, in pray tell, ends up calling them said real name. But either way, another thing I was thinking about too with the whole Marty thing, I was wondering, like, is that where that weird, like, jack-off thing kind of comes from? Like, I wonder, is there something deeper you can correlate? Like, the ending of season 2 where he's on top of the building jerking off saying, I can do whatever the fuck I want. I'm like, which I heard someone say, like, that scene was actually, that, at least, I guess maybe, I don't know if that's something from the comics that they were doing panel for panel type of thing on screen. But, like, I heard someone say, like, that was actually supposed to be something from season 1, but they ended up moving it to season 2. For whatever reason, maybe they felt like it would have been too much to do it. Whatever the case may be. And also, like, the Stormfront crispy hand job. Well, that hand wasn't as burnt, I don't think. But it's like, the hand job she gave him in, like, episode 1 of last season. I'm like, I don't know if you could... I feel like you could draw some association with the whole, like, him being nicknamed Squirt. Like, I feel like there's an association that could be kind of there to some extent. I don't know. That might be me drawing parallels that aren't necessary. But yeah, like either way, continuing the Homelander thing, I went on that massive tangent. I do apologize, but I feel like it's all, I just kind of wanted to let you into some of my thought process of like some of the stuff that was like rattling through my head throughout those scenes. But his scene alone with Barbara was so interesting, of her kind of saying like, once again, like, we had a right to like be fearful of you, but your human need for love and attention, that will never go away. In fact, she's like, we brought the best psychologists in the world in so that we could do it. I was like, yo, you kind of pulling a Mayville. You're talking your shit and you know it will get you killed. She's even saying like, right, you can kill me, you can kill all of us, but she's like, it won't erase any of this. You're still going to have to basically live with you. And, he's like, oh, like, I'm going to get rid of all that. And he's like, oh, in fact, they're talking in the bad room. He's like, let me show you why I call it the bad room. Feels very poetic that the person he would leave alive is Barbara, as he had literally everyone in that room torn to shreds. That is fucking horrendous. And she had is like, no, you get to live with that. Like, the monster you made, the chickens have come home to roost, and like, your creation is here, and now you have to live with the trauma of, you never know, maybe one day I'll come back and finish you off. You just never know when and how, so live the rest of your life in fear. I mean, you were just kind of moving and shaking. Everyone's acting like nothing was an issue because John hadn't come to them in so long. But it's like, yeah, this is him trying to bury the past. I mean, I think it speaks volumes that he probably hasn't been here since the experiments were done on him as a child. Since he was like, the last like thing we saw, I think, was him at 16 and when he became Homelander. So after that, after he made his outing as Homelander, he probably never came back. So this is probably because John's supposed to be in like I'd assume he's kind of close to Anthony Starr's age. I think Anthony Starr's like in his 40s, right? So like he's supposed to be around that. So it's been over half of his life he hasn't been back here. So it's probably like maybe mid 20s to 30 years or something like that. So I don't know. Like in years wise of like, it's been like maybe 25 to 30 years that he hasn't been here. It's type of situation maybe. Either way. But yeah, he just walks away just smiling because you're kind of like, right, what's this mean going forward for Homelander? Because he's been removed from everything because this has been his journey the entire episode. So he hasn't seen all that's kind of going on the other side of things, which you have Sage putting Firecracker on a pedestal, trying to raise her up, giving her own show, and it's being filmed right across from like the Starlight House and everything. I'm doing that 100% on purpose. Obviously, it's meant to be public perception, but also like it's supposed to be psychological warfare too, which ultimately Sage wins. I wouldn't say Firecracker necessarily won. Maybe she kind of did because she kind of got what she wanted, but I'm sure it wasn't all that she wanted. But either way, I think it's interesting, too, that when Butcher shows up, because MM's like, we need all the hands on deck we can get, and Annie was so reluctant, and it's like, okay, Butcher's asking a question, why does she have it, like, why is she coming after you so hard? And Annie's like, I don't know why. And it's like, no, you do know why. You found out last episode, but I think there's some level of... Annie and Butcher have had such a weird relationship. Weird in the capacity of like, right, he doesn't like soups and stuff. Like, they've always had a very tumultuous animosity-driven like thing. Once again, even like episode 2, trying to tell her like, you ain't one of us, And so I think it's like she never wants to give... She doesn't... Like, the last person she wants to get a satisfaction of knowing like, oh, I call you out time and time again for being a shitty person. And yes, I did a shitty thing in my past, but she's always tried to present herself as like, oh, I'm this goody two-shoes. I'm this good person. Annie never looks at it as like, oh, but I've never made a mistake in my life. But the show does frame it as like she's always been a goody two-shoes. But like, people are flawed. People make mistakes. So she said some horrendous shit when she was younger. It's like, it becomes that conversation of, should you be held responsible for like, right, your mom, we saw the way your mom brought you up. So you being like, yeah, your mom taught you to be ruthless. Understandable. But it's like, you also have to take your own responsibility with that. And it's like Annie, like, she's grown and probably thinks like, right, that was me as a kid. I'm not going to like carry that to my adulthood. But now someone from her past is throwing that in her face, trying to do everything to discredit her, being like, yeah, you were this person in the past, but this is still who you are today. And it's like, maybe on some level it's there. It's been bubbling beneath the surface that there is a part of you that, like, that didn't just come out of nowhere. That wasn't just your mom. That maybe somewhere in you, there is still that 13-year-old quote unquote mean girl is still there. You just choose to be the better person, you know? I mean, that's what people do every day. They choose to be, you know, you can choose whether to be a bad person or good person, regardless of your circumstance. Your circumstances do play a role in it, but it is a choice every day whether or not to be a good person or not. I know, I like to believe it's a choice that, you know, people can hopefully choose to make. But yeah, like, Sage is doing their thing. It's like, right, we're going to use troll farms. We're going to find the most fringe anti-Starlight stuff. And it's like, what was it? Arrogant white, hashtag arrogant white, white feminism, I think it was what it was. But it's like, yeah, we're going to find all the things that people hate about Starlight, and then like the most minute fringe groups online, and then we're going to bolster that, and we're going to plaster it all over the place. We're going to make that shit mainstream to kind of demolish our reputation, which I think it speaks volumes that the Deep is like, cool. It's like, well, his reputation got destroyed in his mind because of Starlight. Once again, you raped her, you're a piece of shit. So, but, you know, from his perspective, it's kind of like, yeah, time she got taken down a peg or two. Like, he's kind of, I mean, it's also because of the whole him and Sage thing, which we'll get to later. But yeah, Firecracker's doing her thing, bringing Ezekiel on stage. It's kind of interesting. I don't think we've seen him since season 1, have we? Since the what was that, like episode 5? When Starlight made her, like, I think that was the last time we saw Ezekiel on the show, if I remember correctly. So, but yeah, Butcher tried to blackmail Firecracker. That was some wild shit where it's like, oh yeah, she was 28 years old, like at like a counselor at the Capes for Christ thing, and she slept with a 15-year-old. You're like, fuck, dude. And it's like, that is sometimes the thing that, like, that's always the hypocrisy behind it. It's like, yo, the people who tout some bullshit typically are people who are proponents of said bullshit, you know? So it's like, oh, she's the one out there being like, yo, pushing like, oh, so-and-so's a pedophile, so-and-so is this. It's like, you literally, like, slept with a 15-year-old and, like, basically had the statutory stuff disappear. I was like, yo, that's fucking wild. And he's like, oh, you tweet this. Either I'm going to tweet this or I'm going to, you tell us what Sage is up to. And Firecracker made her move. She was like, no, let's do it. Like, you fuck around and find out. She pressed the tweet button and went out on stage and was like, right, I did this terrible thing, but oh my God, it's like that. God put that boy in my life so that I could become a better person. It's like, oh, horseshit. You know, but she's using that to pull herself back up, and it's like, oh, the power of religion, the power of Jesus, the power of God made me a better person. And yeah, I did a horrible, horrible thing, but I'm a better person now for it. You know, it's like, and it's just like Starlight hates it, and it's just, and then like using that opportunity, it's like, oh, I know these are people associate with you. Let me stick it. You want to bring my past up? All right, bet I can bring your past up. One of the first times she saved anyone, she stopped in, a hostage situation, but she blinded a mom. It's like, damn, that sucks. I don't think anyone there is judging her, because she's like, right, it's not like she killed someone. Well, she has subsequently killed someone. I wonder, will we ever bring that up, the dude that she killed in episode 2? It was like off the road. Like, I don't know if anyone will ever find out the truth about that. That's something I'm curious if that's going to rear its ugly head for Annie too. That's something we hadn't pulled the trigger on. I don't know if that's something they're just going to like, we're going to ignore that. Because like no one knows about that except for Butcher. Like I said, it just goes back to the point of, she had made that point of like, yo, don't act like we're the same. Even though they did bond that episode over Huey, that's only good situation Annie and Butcher have had the entire show, I think, was that one scene where they were with Huey in the hospital when they were like bonding. I think that's the only real time they've had. That's like I said, Annie just didn't want Butcher to have the satisfaction of being like, oh yeah, like kind of, because in her mind it also feeds into the narrative of him being like, oh yeah, like all soups are shit, all soups are terrible. Like I think she feels like the last person she wants to be able to have like that smug I told you so face is Butcher. you know? But either way, it's like, yeah, blinded, that first person she ever saved was a mother of three, and you're just like, she made a mistake, which is so effed up. Like, yes, there's so much collateral damage, but it's like, there's so much, you know, A-Train literally ran through Robin and didn't give a shit. In fact, he was in the club partying it up, laughing about it, and all the other horrendous shit he's done. So it's like, amongst all the superhero shenanigans and quote-unquote collateral damage that's happened, I think Annie's on the lesser end. Sure, you could be like, you know, it's like, oh, she played it up for the camera. She didn't really think much of it and just moved on with her life. But it's like, oh, that mother is permanently blind for the rest of her life. It's like, there's give and take with that, but it's not as bad. It's bad, but not as bad as some of the other shit we've seen. But it's like, yeah, especially because, like, that's what happens with your figures. Like, people enjoy not only building you up, they cannot wait to tear you down, especially when you're put in such a very, like, Jesus-like position. Because, like, publicly, like, even when she's been under scrutiny with stuff in the past, people have been like, eventually like, oh, there was a mistake, Starlight's a good person. So she's always been the person of the people, and now it's like that all kind of got blown up in her face this episode. I didn't even talk about the fact that she had a meeting with Singer, because she's trying to get like that suit bill passed, because she wants Vought to be taken down. It's like, with my influence, I can get people backing your play. We could get people out there in the streets pushing for this, but it all kind of backfires. I don't know if like Sage had that like all calculated, knowing that after meeting with Firecracker, like, 'cause she knew like Firecracker would be Annie's undoing, her kryptonite. So I don't know, like, you don't know how far ahead she's thought stuff out and thought about like the permeations of just how things could play out, and like the most likely percentage chance of something like happening. So, but it's not also all of that. Firecracker proceeded to like throw shade on Annie by putting it out there that she had an abortion 6 months ago, and it's like, yeah, something that's so private, putting her medical records out there, and it's like, right. As Bob puts it later on, it's like, right, certain Republicans won't view that nicely, so that was meant to throw massive, massive shade at her. I'd also forgot, just because I was thinking about it, it's like, you know, it's like, right, some of their special celebrity guests were supposed to be John Voight and Kanye West, which I was like, okay, that's funny. But anyway, Starlight, after that, flew over there and proceeded to beat the ever-living shit out of Firecracker, which Sage kind of counted on that, because it's like, for one, it tarnishes Annie's reputation. Two, she also was kind of getting some get back at Firecracker, because Firecracker was like, oh my god, I thought you were uppity, but you're actually one of the good ones. She's like, thanks. It's like, cool, I got what I want. Firecracker, you also got what you want, but I also got a little bonus to think you get the shit beaten out of you. So Firecracker probably won't think much of it. She probably won't realize that that was probably a part of Sage's calculations that she was probably hoping for, or very least probably most likely knew that was going to happen. So I don't know if Firecracker's going to put that together, but that's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. And I doubt we're done with Firecracker, but she's definitely going to use this. It's going to boost her even more, because it's like, hey, she called out Starlight, and look what happened. Look, not only what Starlight did, it's like, while Starlight is falling, Firecracker's star is getting bigger and bigger. Which, even the old Ezekiel thing, once again, the fucking gymnastic math of Starlight is 9. But is it a 9? Like, it's 9 letters. Or is it really 6? Because 9, we flip it upside down, is 6. Annie, January, 12 letters. Oh my god, 12, 6, 6, 6. It's like, what? It's like the math is there. It's like, oh, dude. So yeah. That was interesting, but obviously, because I was curious, I was like, did her and Huey know? And it's like, yeah. She's like, she agonized over that decision, and it's like, right, now having it in the public eye, it's just like, it made her have to relive it over and over again. It's like, I wasn't ready to be a parent. Huey was like, I wasn't ready either. And whatever those circumstances are, those are their reasons alone. That shouldn't have to be something publicly, unless you feel comfortable talking about it, you know? But you shouldn't have your shit like blasted like that, you know, and used in this ammunition this way. It's like, so that's the nail in the coffin that Sage had gotten to use against Annie, because she just knew that would be the thing that like, for one, it divide her base, because even with her being like the the liberal that she is, but she still is. What she represents is something both sides can agree. Like, she was kind of that middle ground, because it's like, because of that, a lot of Bob's like Republican people want nothing to do with him because of Starlight. So I think it is a thing of, there probably were Republicans that were on her side. Like, she probably told that line of, like, yeah, she was very liberal. There's probably a good chunk of Republicans that were like on Homelander's side, but I'm sure like it's supposed to be like, no, like, she is that middle ground. She represents all that is good. Her Christian background, her having only like presented herself in the best light, being like a hero's hero type of thing. So, but yeah, this really probably pushed a lot of people to not want to fuck with Starlight anymore. And so, and then also on top of that, she gets the 1-2 punch of, she's got to watch, out of anyone, having to watch Newman online talk about, oh, Starlight, yada yada yada. For one, this makes Bob looks bad, but it also benefits Newman to kind of make Bob look bad too, because it could be like, oh, maybe this could be her swinging to be like, rather than, they did say that they were going to help take out Bob, but I thought they were going to make it just kind of more like a physically take him out, kill him, but they're probably going to destroy his reputation a little bit, then take him out. But they're definitely putting Newman in a more favorable light, especially when she's able to kind of step out and talk about her president like that. I don't follow enough politics. I'm sure that happens from time to time. I mean, it makes you wonder, does it? Where like your VP is able... I mean, it's not like they've been elected. That's like your president. This is like a potential, like, these are people running for president. She's like running for VP. So she's in a more favorable position to probably call him out, because that will probably boost her to kind of take the card and be the one thing. But once again, the hypocrisy of like all that you've done, you're calling out Annie for her violence. It's like, oh, I once considered her a friend and stuff like that. It's just like, oh boy. And then like getting leaned into by Bob about like, right, the mistakes she made, she lost her cool and it all came crumbling down. So there's that. I do appreciate that Kimiko and Huey were there to kind of comfort her. At the same time, this is all going down to, like, because of Butcher's involvement, there's two things. One, the situation with him in the shower, because at first we saw the snake thing, because I haven't commented on it, up in the, like, whatever that is underneath his skin or whatever. I'm like, that, I don't know if it's different ones or the same one, but I'm like, the one that was in his back looked massive compared to the one that we've seen pop up at his head, and he passed out, banged his head on like the faucet. You're like, Jesus. And Becca's there telling him to get up. It's like, even if you got this limited amount of time, you can't just give up and die. So he gets up, and he doesn't talk about it, but he is pushing MM to try and help the Ryan situation, even if you have to force him to. Like, because Becca was looking at it, and I'm like, because for Becca in his head, it's like, if you are pushing this on the Marvin, that means you are giving up. He's like, I'm being realistic, but for her, it's like, if you like positive thinking can do a lot. Like the things that you like, your mind thinks something enough, it can, like, your body can reflect on. So having a good mindset can help. I'm not saying it's end all be all, but having a positive outlook can help things out. And so from his perspective, it's like, I've got to be realistic about this, and I'm going to leave it to Marvin. You are a better person. You're not only a great dad, you're also just the best person I know. So I know, like, I can leave Ryan in your care. And it's like, but the Becca inside of his head's just kind of like, right, you doing that means you are signing your death warrant. You're not even going to really fight. You're always going to have in the back of your mind, like, I'm going to die. So you won't be giving it your all. You won't be fighting all the time. I think that's the thing of, like, how much of that is his subconscious trying to keep him alive, and is that instinct in any human being, that fight or flight, that's instinct to, like, not die, is that it manifests itself as a person he would listen to the most, the person that would keep him going. So there's been other theories about Butcher's hallucinations. I won't talk about them until we get there, just because it might enter spoiler territory, but I'll just say, like, it is ruminating around online some theories about maybe Becca isn't the only person that he's hallucinating. We'll leave it at that. I mean, that's probably enough of a thought, but like, I'll talk about it more if it ever comes up in the show, because when other people pointed it out, I was like, that does present an interesting theory. Either way, when it's all said and done, Butcher, when he was dealing with Ezekiel, that was interesting, like freezing his arm with the fire extinguisher and then shattering it. But then, like, he was near death and Becca's telling him to get up, and then he blacked out, and by the time he woke up, he had ripped Ezekiel to shreds. You're like, because like the thing inside the worm or whatever the hell that is started activating, and he blacked out. I was like, yo, is this supposed to be some Moon Knight shit? Which feels like it's supposed to, at least TV show wise. I know that's not always who Moon Knight is in the comics or whatever, but yeah, like that whole thing of him blacking out, being like, what the fuck just happened? I was like, what is that? Could we find out later on Butcher took regular V as an attempt to heal his cancer, his brain cancer, but it didn't work. In fact, he's like, all it did was speed things up. So I'm like, oh, cool. So you already had terrible brain cancer. Now you gave yourself super brain cancer. I mean, maybe it was already technically super brain cancer, but now it's like souped up super brain cancer. But maybe whatever it was, he souped up inside of him too. Like the reason why those things are the way they are, like, is because they were enhanced by the V. Like because maybe the combination of Temp V and like original recipe, maybe the combination of the two is what kicked this in overdrive, whatever the hell this is. But for him to like to rip Ezekiel apart like that, it's like, that in itself kind of leads credence to some theories about Butcher's hallucinations, like the angel and devil on his shoulder type of situation. I'm so curious, like, what the like, do you have superpowers? He said like, no, but maybe, like I said, maybe some Moon Knight shit of like, yeah, you have one of your personalities do. Like maybe you're having a disassociation type of shit happening right now. I don't know how that would necessarily work, considering like, well, like because of, well, I'm sure I don't know enough about dissociation to know, like, does it manifest itself in a manner of like you're seeing someone that people you know rather than like, I'm sure it can work like that. I don't know. It feels like that's the route they're going down with that. I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see. Circling over to Frenchie, who was involved with the whole Ezekiel situation, he said something I thought was kind of interesting last episode. I didn't talk about it too much. He had made the point to Kimiko, like, all right, we're not tied to the hip. And someone else had said, like, no, that's not true. And I was like, yeah, it is not true. Like, since the beginning of this series, ever since Kimiko was introduced, like, anytime, like, Frenchie goes somewhere, for the most part, except for when they were in their bad spot in season 2, him and Kimiko have always been a pairing. Like, wherever he goes, she goes. Wherever she goes, he, like, you know, it always works like that. This is, like, the first season they've really kind of been apart since season 2. And it's very similar circumstances. They're both kind of going through stuff, and it's more so Frenchie pushing her away. But obviously, like, he learns from Colin, finally talks about his family, and he's like, yeah, my mom was a federal judge going after, like, some Russian woman. I was like, oh, so, like, Frenchie was sitting there because that wasn't just like, oh, Nina hired that out because, like, right, someone wants this judge dead. It's like, no, Nina wanted that judge dead. Because she said, like, oh, this Russian woman was going to be made an example of. So that was Nina cleaning up something personal to herself. I guess Frenchie didn't know. I guess he didn't care. Never crossed his mind that might have been him doing what worked directly for Nina, that him cleaning up her problem. So that already sucks, too, because, like, well, you and Nina aren't on good terms because she tried to kill you, and she was going to kill Kimiko and Shuri last season, so... But also, he also had no idea Colin was in the house at the time. He was like, yeah, Colin was like, I hid underneath the bed. All I saw were, like, the scars on the person's ankles, and they're, like, burned or whatever. And we're like, well, we know Frenchie's dad would, like, put cigarettes out on him, so... And then it's like, oh, so even during sex, like, Colin never noticed that, you know? I mean, it depends on how much time you spend around your partner's legs. You see all these scars around him, but, like, you wouldn't associate it with the person. Why would you even think, like, oh, yeah, the guy I'm sleeping with who I have feelings for is the guy who killed my family? But then later on, it finally got to Frenchie, and he had to tell Colin the truth. And Colin proceeded, and it's like, once again, everyone's going through it, because Colin proceeded to beat the shit out of Frenchie. It was going to strangle him, but then stops, and it's like, right, stay away from me. If I ever see you again, I will kill you. It's just, yeah, because, like, Frenchie, as I brought up previously, as we saw with the situation with Mallory's grandchildren, it's like, I don't ever want to be off the hook. I don't deserve to be. Like, Frenchie... This isn't the first time we've seen this. Frenchie has internalized, like, mistakes he's made in the past. Everyone does. And everyone in the show has. And this was just a situation where it's like it's the only time he's directly connected with someone that's a victim of what he's done. Mallory kind of in a sense, and I guess maybe some of that's kind of alleviated some of his guilt, but being around Colin, letting himself get close to Colin, that was kind of a mistake. But it's just like he wants forgiveness and absolution, but he also feels like, right, if you kill me, then maybe that can alleviate my guilt. But it's like, are you doing this for Colin, or are you doing it for yourself? And it's like, you are trying to alleviate your own guilt more than trying to help Colin. You're more so trying to feel like death is the only way you can be forgiven. It's the only way you can pay for what you've done. So I want to tie that into the Kimiko stuff. As I was talking about them earlier not being tied to the hip, it's actually interesting. Her and Huey was an interesting pairing this episode because they're rarely ever alone together. I feel like this is like, usually anytime Huey's around Kimiko, it's usually with like other people in the team, but it's never like them by themselves at all. So I was like, oh, that was kind of really interesting. Because it's like, yeah, thanks for like being my muscle. I was like, oh, that's really neat. Because you never get to see those two as just like a regular pairing. Because typically Kimiko is attached to the hip with Frenchie, funny enough. And even then, they're usually with like maybe MM or... I'm trying to think of a situation, like, I don't think there's even been situations where they're just alone with Huey. Has there been? I don't think so. Either way, because like the main person that Huey typically is with is, amongst the boys, is Butcher. But maybe that's also because I'm thinking, like, but maybe like all of last season's kind of like conflated that in my head. But either way, Huey's with Kimiko because he's meeting up with A-Train because his mom has made the decision to pull the plug because the doctors say, yeah, your dad's practically like clinically brain dead, and it's like keeping him alive now is just it's just not a viable, like it's just there is no chance of recovery. And despite everything, his mom, it's like she makes that decision. It's like, this is what your dad would want. I mean, he did sign a DNR situation, so it's like he would want the plug pulled in this regard. And for Huey, that's something he's struggling with. And now you can see him looking at like the IV and stuff. You're like, right, he's going to get some V, and he goes to A-Train to do this. And A-Train's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get you an EV. First and foremost, Homelanders. It's interesting to find out, like, okay, at least who knows how much V is still being produced in general, but whatever it might be out there in the world, we see that Homelander's got a monopoly on it. He keeps that close to vest. In fact, he keeps it at his place. So ultimately, Huey's kind of like, you owe me, because every terrible thing that's kind of happened, it started with you. A-Train running through Robin set all of this show in motion. Granted, there were obviously moving pieces already in play, like the butcher of it all, like the boys had already been a pre-existing thing, but like this kind of was Butcher's end to kind of bring everything back, to bring the boys back. So it did start everything. So it's like, I'll start for you, so you owe me. And as you get this for me, and especially when A-Train hears like, oh, it's for your dad, the first thing that comes out of his mouth is like, we'll be good. We'll squash our beef. Like, you'll forgive me, right? And Huey's like, yes, we'll be good. I won't owe you anything anymore. But I think there is a level of A-Train hearing that, being like, right, because I'm sure he's thought about it, but his brother would never co-sign like getting V. I don't know. I would assume V would be able to help his brother's circumstances as well, but he would never be able to get around to his brother to do it. He'd have to sneak it in, and his brother already hates him, so like that would just make his brother hate him even more. So, but I wonder, will Reggie get inspired by Huey's situation and decide to do something for his brother similarly? I don't know. Probably not, because it's like stealing one vial from Homelander is one thing, stealing another, one might not be noticeable. Homelander's super going to notice. Or, but two definitely missing, he will definitely notice. But he's definitely regardless of him not always being the smartest, he is meticulous. He does pick up on stuff, but to be fair, that's a lot of him like picking up on powers, utilizing his powers to kind of compensate for his shortcomings, like on a mental scale, and not being extremely smart, because he can be an idiot sometimes. But he lets his pride and his like ego get the best of him in a lot of ways. But I'm sure he could probably smell A-Train and even Ashley in his place. Which I love. Ashley took Cameron's advice and took a shit in his toilet. And I love that A-Train was like, did you think? She's like, what? No, that was already there. So it's like, cool. How about we both like try not, because like Homelander will kill us both if he finds out we were here doing our respective things. So cool. We'll just keep this a secret. To be fair, neither one of us wants to be at Vought right now. And it's like, we're both just scared out of our minds. We kind of, it's interesting because she might be the only ally he has, because it's like, well, you can't count on the Deep because the Deep's always looking out for himself. He's proved that time and time again. To be fair, A-Train has done the same, but it's like, yeah, A-Train's trying to like have his redemption arc right now, so I don't know if it could always be poetic if Ashley ends up selling him out for the purposes of getting brownie points with Homelander, but it's like, yeah, we both kind of need to look out for each other. We're the only people we can count on in this circumstance, because everyone else. I'm curious about Noir, because I don't know if Noir is worried about, like, the new Noir. I don't know if he's worried about pissing off Homelander like everyone else is. We'll have to wait to see, like, because he's like, oh, like, fine, I'll do whatever Homelander asks us to, but he's like, I'm trying to understand my role and stuff, and he shuts up when Homelander tells him to, but we don't know if he lives in constant fear. You'd assume so, because he does what he's told, but who knows if he lives in the same constant fear as Ashley, Deep, and A-Train. Granted, we say them, but I mean, doesn't seem like Firecracker has that same approach, because she, like, has a thing for him, so she doesn't share that same fear. Sage probably does, but her brain probably prevents her, which we'll get to Sage in her brain soon enough. I thought it was interesting, like I said, the pairing of Kimiko and Huey, especially because Kimiko was upset. It's like, why did you tell me the contact you were making was A-Train? Because she also, for one, knows what that means for Huey. Let's also not forget, she broke A-Train's leg, fractured it with a crowbar in season 1. Funny enough, in correlation to Huey's dad, because he was being held hostage by A-Train. So it's interesting how that all comes. It's like, that has to be done on purpose. So it's like, yeah, that actually does come full circle. That's probably one of the few Huey and Kimiko scenes you would like them on their own to some extent. So, but it's like, yeah, why didn't you tell me, like, this was about your... And also, like, don't do this. Like, I know it's harsh to say, but you should let your dad die. Especially for Kimiko, it's just, like, she understands the burden of, like, you know, she's come to accept that more. She's come to accept, like, right, V is neither good nor bad, but she knows, like, your dad wouldn't want this. Like, it should be natural. Like, our circumstances are what it is, but your dad is just, like, it wasn't something superhero related that put him in this situation. It was just sadly a effed up natural thing of, like, he sadly had a stroke, and it's just, like, you kind of let things go, but it's, like, he can't. It's, like, it's my dad. And I think Kimiko could probably, she understands that better than anyone. Losing her parents, losing her brother, like, what she'd give to have them back. So, but yeah, the moment they were getting spotted, I was like, is that someone for Huey? Doesn't seem like they're for A-Train. And they focus on Kimiko. I was like, it's the shining light. And so, yeah, they tracked her down. They've been keeping an eye on her. Huey gets, like, trips over something, messes up his ankle. Kind of reminds me of Economos from a Peacemaker, if you've seen the season finale. It kind of reminded me of that. And Kimiko's teaching him, like, all right, you need to go into self-defense mode. Gave him, like, a piece of a drawer to defend himself as a shield and a box cover. I love that she took, like, broke off, God, what the hell is that called? Paper cutter? I don't remember. I can't think of the proper name. Maybe it's just paper cutter. I don't know. Broke off that as kind of like a makeshift machete. And it's like, we're going to defend ourselves. She's kind of teaching him, like, right, you got to go for the vital points. Like, go for the leg, maybe the wrist, and then go for the throat. It's like, okay, I got it. She's like, if you want to, like, basically get back to your dad, you have to fight or die if you want to make sure your dad's okay. So they go through it. She does her thing. Huey does his own, too. And it's like, every once in a while, Huey has his moments of stepping up, kind of like the lamplighter situation from season 2, where it's just like, oh, fuck it, I got to do something hardcore. But yeah, he ends up that last, like, the dude, he cut the dude's leg, the dude cut his leg and had him up against the wall, and he stabbed him. He, like, gutted the bastard, kind of did a seppuku on him, just kind of, like, slit it and just kind of, but obviously it's a box cover, so it's not going to go deep enough, but then immediately slash home dude's throat, and in typical Huey fashion, gets covered in blood. But it's just kind of that moment of, like, right, this is normal human Huey. Because the last time Huey killed someone, like, non-superhero wise, because he's only, like, I think this is the third person Huey's ever killed. The first person being translucent, and obviously that caused some trauma. The second person he's ever killed was, oh god, the dude he killed in Russia in season 3. And now this. I think these are the only people, I'm trying to legitimately think. I think those are the only 3 people Huey's ever killed in the entire show. So he's averaging about 1 kill per season, roughly speaking. Not really, because like I said, I don't think he killed anyone at all in season 2. Not that I can remember off the top of my head. So, but I guess it's also supposed to symbolize, like, yeah, no tip V or whatever, kind of showcasing you can do it. We saw in a previous episode he was getting self-defense lessons from Annie, so I'm sure that played a part in it, plus Kimiko's guidance, because she's a pretty good fighter. Even without, I mean, her powers, like, do some damage, but we've seen, back last season that, once again, she's trained. She, even before becoming a soup, she had capabilities. Which you finally find out the beef between her and Homegirl, which that was wild. Once again, just showcasing Kimiko's healing ability. She literally got exploded. Her guts are hanging, her body split in half, recovered and everything. But it turns out this girl that hates Kimiko so much is Kimiko kidnapped her. You're like, wow. So they had these child soldiers repeat it. It's like, okay, we're sending you out to kidnap someone else to be one of our soldiers. So what was done to Kimiko, she did to someone else, just because, probably not that she necessarily believed in the fight, but she was, she was raised in it. You can't really fight against it. And they were kind of pitted against each other in a dogfight. In fact, I figured the scar she had was most likely from Kimiko. But it's like, yeah, I hate you. Like, not only did you do this to me, not only did you kidnap me, you left me this scar, and you got to get away from the shining light, but I'm like neck deep in this stuff that I don't believe in the cause. I was dragged into this because of you. And that ends up being kind of that sad reality where you have Kimiko talking about trafficking, but once again, the mistakes of your past of, you don't always, it's like, wow, I did this to you. And she's like, I hate you, Kimiko. I'm never going to, like, forgive you. If Kimiko's not going to forgive herself, it's like, I'm talking about, like, I got on that guy's case last episode 2, about, like, right, go find the real traffickers instead of this fairy tale stuff. But it's like, right, I helped contribute to that situation, Once again, it's one of those sad situations of stuff gets perpetuated. So either way, Huey shows up with the V, and he's going to give it to, he gets the V from A-Train, and A-Train's like, you're not going to forgive me, are you? But Huey's like, I do. Like, we're good. And that has been obviously this 4-season arc between him and A-Train. They had their duke up at, like, where A-Train legitimately did apologize to Huey, but Huey was like, man, fuck that. I ain't trying to hear that shit. I mean, to be fair, it brought out the more nastier side of Huey because of the tip V. But he also felt like, oh yeah, I'm strong now. Like, I can actually fight you. I can pay you back for what you did to Robin. But now it's also like, with everything going on in my life, I don't want to hold on to hate. And that's what he explains to Butcher. And it's like, would Butcher be in a forgiving mood to Homelander? It's like, obviously not. But he's more so concerned. Other things take precedent. It's like, right, I hate Homelander. You've always been my number one target. But his eye is more so on Ryan now. Just like Huey's like, I'm just trying to take care of my dad. And Butcher told him, like, his circumstances, like, right, don't do this. You're just going to make things worse. Like, don't ruin what's already kind of you got left, But for Huey, it's like, it's my dad. It's like, if you could take this, would you try and save yourself? He's like, I did, and it didn't work. In fact, it kind of screwed things over. And so when the time comes, Huey chooses not to. And I think this kind of speaks volumes that him and his mom are decent right now, but it doesn't mean he's completely forgiven his mom, because when he's there touching his dad, his mom goes over to touch him. He's like, no, I'm good. And he's like, I just need some air. It's like him and his mom aren't fully good. He's trying to be more forgiving, because he even said it about the A-Train. It's like, I'm not doing that for her. I'm doing that for me. And I think that's kind of reflective of his mom's situation. Like, I harbor a lot. It means a lot to him to hear his mom apologize, because sometimes that's all that matters. But as I talked about in season 3, he didn't forgive A-Train. But now he kind of trying to but that's more so for himself. And he's doing the same thing here with his mom. It's like, with everything going on, I need to let go of a lot of this stuff, because this is my dad. This is no time to be not tripping. He's justified in, like, his complicated feelings towards his mom. But when he walked away and his mom had that look in her eyes, I was like, is she going to find the V in his coat? Like, what made her decide to even check it? Like, maybe she just was moving his coat and found it. Like, or maybe she had some on her own. I mean, we know she works for Vought, but she works like or not unless she lied about where she works from. But I'm like, I don't know. Like, but like the moment she was looking, I was like, you put it in there, didn't you? And she did. And we see that Huey's dad's awake. So the big question becomes, well, what superpower is Huey's dad going to get? I'd assume my theory about how, Compound V works, it's all genetic. So because Huey got a teleporting ability because of the tip V, I can only assume that his dad's going to have the same power, because, once again, whatever power you get, it happens to you, as we see with Homelander to Ryan. Well, Ryan has all of Homelander's abilities. I mean, it's also first natural born suit, but you take someone like Polarity and Andre, which we did get a little bit, we got a little tech night this episode being like, oh yeah, the whole truth about everything went down in Godolkin, the quote unquote whole truth. About our four getting locked up. But aside from all of that, like once again, look at Polarity and Andre. Like their powers are the same because it is like it's written, like whatever power you're going to get is written in your DNA, and that's passed on to your child when you have them. So because of that, I can only assume Huey's dad is going to have the teleportation ability. We'll see whether this breaks that or not, but it seems like that has been the trend so far in the show up until now. It seems like that's been the case. That's why I also feel like probably if A-Train's brother got injected with V, he'd most likely get a speed ability too, because not just because they're brothers, because they share the same DNA. So we'll see. Like I said, I'm sure there probably have been examples that I'm not thinking of that have broken that, but it's felt like a consistent enough rule that the show set up but never really like made too much of a point of, but it does seem there to some extent. Because you can make the argument with like the Homelander and Soldier Boy thing, but it's like, well, to be fair, Homelander is genetically modified and born versus Benzo, like he shares his DNA, so it's a little different. Like I also brought up too, like I have no idea how like the having 50% of your mom's DNA, 50% of your dad's DNA, like how that might affect the V situation as well. Either way, I also wanted to talk about, and that was the Sage stuff. That was actually a theory people had floating around on the internet already, because once again, there was the thing at the end of episode 3 where you're like, what the hell is that about? And people theorized what that was, and it turns out the internet was right. Basically, she lobotomizes herself because she's like, right, most people's brains stop growing after 25, hers doesn't, so she just for a couple hours gets to be dumb and just kind of turn her brain off. And so she was kind of shitty to the deep at earlier parts of the episode. He's like, why are you so like hot and cold with me, like what's up with that? And for her it's like, yo, I need you to lobotomize me. And he's like, oh man, that's so gross. And she's like, I will let you ass fuck me while we watch the Ray J and Kim K thing. He's like, okay, so like how do I go about this? And you're like, yeah, right to the eye. It's like, yeah, make sure you don't hit my eye, try not to get blinded, but hammer it twice, and like start scraping my brain. I'm like, ugh. And then she's immediately like, want to take you to Flavor Town, my pussy. And I'm like, yo, this is such a wild pairing. And what's going to happen when Ambrosius finds out? It's going to be the real interesting element there. But like, it almost seemed like she was also kind of getting off to like, oh yeah, scrape my brain. Yeah, I was like, it felt like it was almost like a weird kink in a way. And it's just like, oh, and in fact, this is like the deepest, the most like, I don't know, man, might be one of the most sexually weird people on this show. Like, I mean, Ashley has her thing, but it's also kind of like, yeah, but it's kind of Cameron's thing, but it's also like, I mean, it's not as weird as kind of like the shit that the Deep gets up to. He's up to some, I mean, because he, bestiality shit, so it's like, ugh. But then other people kind of been like, yes, it is, but it's also because of his circumstances. Is it really bestiality? Because there is consensuality with the fact is because he can communicate with the animals, specifically sea life. Yeah, that's a whole conversation I'm not about to get into. But people have kind of brought that up. But either way, yeah, I completely forgot to bring up that angle. So I also wasn't expecting us to get the answer immediately. Like I said, I want to say that was episode 3. Yeah, it was definitely episode 3. We got that. So like immediately getting the answer to that. The next episode was really interesting. Like I said, it has been a lot, and I've been running my mouth off for a very long time, so I do apologize, but there's just a lot to break down about this episode. But I am so excited to see where we take where this all takes us in the next episode. We have hit that. I mean, that's the thing. We just hit the halfway point in the season. I mean, obviously we're hitting it like super quickly because of like 3 episodes last week, but still, it's like, holy shit. Like, this is a crazy point to be halfway through the story, so like, where the hell is the back half of this season going to take us? We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.